The cold metallic halls of the UNS Valkyrie hummed with the steady rhythm of the ship's reactor core. It was supposed to be a quiet patrol, just a standard weapons check before they reached the neutral zone. Nothing ever happened on these runs, at least nothing worth remembering. Sergeant Kane adjusted his tactical visor, his boots echoing slightly as he walked through the dimly lit corridors. His squad had done this drill 100 times before. Check the weapons systems, ensure the auto-defense turrets were operational, and confirm that the AI-controlled targeting systems were functioning at peak efficiency. Routine. Boring. "All right, listen up," Kane said, addressing his small team. "Let's get this over with so we can hit the mess hall before the rations turn to ice." Corporal Carter, a lean soldier with an easy grin, smirked. "Sarge, they were already ice when they came out of the dispenser." A few chuckles rippled through the team. The mood was light, relaxed, too relaxed. Kane felt something nagging at the back of his mind. It was instinct, the kind that came from too many years in combat. He ignored it for now. The squad moved toward the armory, where the ship's primary weapon diagnostics were located. A small control station monitored the status of the railguns, plasma cannons, and point defense turrets. Kane tapped a few commands on the screen. "Everything looks green," he muttered, but something felt off. Private Silva, their engineer, furrowed her brow. "Sir, the system reports that one of the automated turrets had a minor power fluctuation a few minutes ago." Kane glanced at her. "Malfunction." Silva shook her head. "Not exactly. More like interference. But it's stable now." A flicker of unease passed through him. "Run a deeper scan." She nodded, fingers moving quickly over the console. The results popped up, and her expression changed. This doesn't make sense." "What?" Kane leaned in. "The system registered a shadow movement in the armory," she whispered. "Something was there, and now it's gone." The atmosphere in the room shifted. The casual energy disappeared as every soldier instinctively tightened their grip on their weapons. "Aye. Confirm security breach," Kane commanded. The ship's AI, a cool synthetic voice, responded instantly. No unauthorized entities detected within the ship. Kane narrowed his eyes. Then what the hell just moved? A tense silence followed. Then Carter spoke. "Sarge, maybe it's a glitch. You know how these AI systems get." The lights flickered. For half a second, the entire ship was bathed in darkness. Then the emergency lights kicked in, casting an eerie red glow over the metal walls. Kane's pulse quickened. He raised his weapon. "Everyone, weapons hot. Move in formation." Carter and Silva fell in behind him as they moved toward the armory door. The entrance was already unlocked. Strange, since it should have been sealed unless accessed manually. Kane motioned for Silva to override the security panel. She hesitated. "Sarge, I've got a bad feeling about this." "Me too," Kane muttered. "Open it." The doors hissed apart, revealing rows of weapons secured in place. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but Kane's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. Then Carter took a cautious step inside. A loud clang echoed through the room. The squad whipped around, rifles aimed in all directions. "Shit," Carter breathed, his rifle raised. "Did you hear that?" Silva nodded. Came from the back. Kane motioned for them to move forward. Their boots barely made a sound against the floor. The weapons remained locked in their storage units. Nothing appeared to be missing. But then, a shadow moved. It wasn't human. Before anyone could react, Carter let out a strangled gasp. His body lifted into the air as if an invisible force had grabbed him by the throat. His rifle clattered to the ground. Kane spun around, aiming at where Carter had been standing. But there was nothing there, just empty space. Then Carter vanished. 1 second, he was struggling against an unseen enemy. The next, he was gone. Silva let out a sharp breath, her voice trembling. "Sarge, where did he go?" Kane didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind raced. There were no life forms detected on the ship. No alarms had gone off. And yet, Carter had disappeared into thin air. Kane activated his visor's thermal imaging. Nothing. Then, movement to the right. He turned just in time to see something flicker in and out of visibility. A shape, a distortion in the air, like a headwave bending light. Cloaking technology. Kane fired. The bullet struck the wall behind where the distortion had been. The squad backed toward the door, their weapons raised. Identify target. Kane barked. The AI responded immediately. No unauthorized entities detected. A chill ran down Kane's spine. Then what the hell just took my man? Silva's breathing was fast and uneven. I don't like this, Sarge. Kane gritted his teeth. He didn't either. Then something whispered behind him. It wasn't a voice. It was a sound, an unnatural hum, low and vibrating. It was right behind him. Kane spun around, swinging his knife. Air. Nothing. Then Silva screamed. He turned just in time to see her body yanked backward into the darkness. She struggled, kicking and clawing at something unseen. And then, just like Carter, she was gone. Kane's blood turned to ice. The room was silent again, except for his own breathing. He was alone. The lights flickered again, and then the whispering returned. A low, unnatural sound, moving around him, circling like a predator playing with its prey. Kane's grip tightened on his rifle. He was a soldier, trained for war. But how the hell did you fight something you couldn't see? A metallic clang echoed from the vents above. His eyes snapped up just in time to see something flicker, almost humanoid in shape, but wrong, before it vanished into the shadows. He took a slow, steady breath. His squad was gone. Something was hunting them inside their own ship, and the AI, meant to detect all foreign entities, couldn't even see it. That meant one thing. This was not a normal enemy, and whatever it was, it had just begun its hunt. Kane's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The armory was deathly silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Carter and Silva were gone. No bodies, no blood, except for a few drops smeared across the cold metal floor. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. The AI hadn't detected anything. There were no security breaches. And yet, something had come aboard. Something had taken them. He tapped his comm. Carter. Silva. Do you copy? Static. He swallowed hard, gripping his rifle tighter. His squad was disappearing one by one, and he had no idea what he was up against. A soft noise, barely more than a whisper, came from the corridor outside the armory. It wasn't the usual hum of the ship. It was something else, something moving. Kane shifted his stance, stepping carefully toward the door. His boots barely made a sound. He pressed his back against the wall, took a steadying breath, then peeked around the corner. The hallway was empty. At least, it looked empty. But then his visor flickered, just for a split second. A faint, almost imperceptible ripple in the air. Like heat distortion. Kane froze. He knew what cloaking technology looked like. He'd seen it in the field before, but never this advanced. The shimmer was barely there, moving along the wall, almost like a shadow without a source. It wasn't just invisible. It was nearly undetectable. Kane switched his visor to thermal mode. His breath caught in his throat. Nothing. Whatever was out there, it wasn't giving off heat. No body temperature, no traceable energy signature. That wasn't possible. Every living thing emitted some kind of heat. Even the cold-blooded creatures humans had encountered on distant worlds still registered something. But this thing was a ghost. Kane exhaled slowly. If it wasn't giving off heat, that meant one thing. It wasn't just biological. A cybernetic hybrid. It explained why the AI hadn't picked it up. The ship's systems were programmed to detect organic life or traditional mechanical threats. But if this thing was something in between, If it was something beyond human understanding, then it made sense why it had slipped through every sensor. And that meant a sound to his left. Kane whipped his rifle up just in time to see another flicker, closer this time. It was moving toward him. His finger tightened on the trigger. But then, the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Kane's breath came fast and sharp. He activated his visor's night vision. But even that flickered with interference. Whatever this thing was, it was messing with the ship's systems. Deliberately. Then, a voice crackled in his earpiece. Faint, distorted. Sarge, help. Kane's blood ran cold. Carter. He gritted his teeth. Carter, where are you? Can't. See, it's everywhere. Then, a choked sound. A gurgling, wet gasp. Silence. Kane's grip tightened. He wasn't a rookie. He wasn't the kind of soldier who panicked. But right now, every instinct was screaming at him. Run. He forced himself to move, staying low, his rifle raised. The ship was designed for combat, but these corridors suddenly felt like a hunting ground. Not for him. For something else. He reached a junction and paused. His training told him to move fast, but his gut told him otherwise. A faint metallic scraping sound echoed from the vent above. Kane didn't look up. He didn't need to. He already knew. It was watching him. His jaw clenched. He took a slow breath. Then, in one swift motion, he raised his rifle and fired. The gunshots shattered the silence. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the ceiling vent. For a fraction of a second, he saw it, a shape shifting and moving, a distortion against the metal. Then it was gone. Kane backed away, his heart hammering. He needed to get to the bridge. He needed to warn the rest of the crew. Whatever was on this ship, it was faster, smarter, and more advanced than anything they had ever faced. And it was playing with him. As he moved toward the nearest stairwell, his comm crackled again. Sarge, it's inside the systems. Kane stopped dead. That wasn't Carter. That was Silva. She was still alive. Barely. Kane's grip tightened on his rifle as he whispered, "Where are you?" Silence. Then static. Then, behind you. Kane spun, gun raised. Nothing. Just empty air. Or at least, that's what it wanted him to think. He fired anyway. This time, he hit something. A screeching sound, high-pitched and unnatural, ripped through the corridor. The cloaking flickered. For the briefest second, Kane saw it. Tall, lithe, a creature with smooth black armor fused into flesh, cybernetics pulsing beneath translucent skin. Eyes, glowing like embers, clawed hands twitching as if adjusting to new prey. Then it vanished again. Kane didn't wait. He ran. He reached the stairwell and took the steps 2 at a time, his breath ragged. He slammed his fist against the emergency panel. The doors hissed open, and he stepped inside. And stopped. The walls were smeared with blood. Not human. Something darker, thicker. It smelled metallic, almost like burning circuitry. A trail of it led down the hall, disappearing around the corner. Kane took a slow step forward. His finger hovered over the trigger. A soft, rhythmic sound filled the corridor. Not footsteps, not breathing. A clicking. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. Kane raised his rifle. "I don't know what you are," he said through clenched teeth, "but you just made a mistake." Silence. Then, a whisper, not from his comm, not in his head, right next to his ear. "No, you did." Kane didn't hesitate. He turned and fired. Kane's rifle roared, muzzle flashes lighting up the dark corridor. The bullets tore through the air, but the creature was already moving, its cloaked form twisting unnaturally. The moment his shots made contact, the thing shimmered, its body momentarily flickering into visibility. It wasn't just dodging, it was adapting. Kane cursed under his breath and dove sideways, rolling behind a supply crate as something whistled past his ear. A razor-thin projectile embedded itself into the metal wall behind him, sizzling on impact. If he had been a fraction of a second slower, it would have gone straight through his skull. He exhaled, trying to steady his breath. This wasn't a fight against some mindless alien brute. This thing, whatever it was, had tactics. It was hunting, analyzing his moves, and adjusting its attacks accordingly. But Kane wasn't going down without a fight. He tapped his comm, whispering, "All remaining crew, if you're still alive, respond." For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, "Sarge." It was Silva. Kane's chest tightened with relief. "Silva, where are you?" "Hiding near the engineering bay," she panted. "Sarge, these things, they're in the ship's systems. They're shutting everything down. The life support, communications, they're taking control." Kane's jaw clenched. That explained why the AI wasn't detecting them. They weren't just avoiding detection. They were rewriting the system from the inside. "How many of you are left?" he asked. Silva hesitated. "Me, Lieutenant Hayes, and a few others. Maybe 5 in total. The rest, they're gone." Damn it. A crew of 50 wiped out in minutes, and the survivors were scattered, hiding like rats in their own ship. Kane's mind raced. If the creatures had full control of the ship, they were already dead. The only way to even the playing field was to take that control back. "Silva," he said, "can you get to the core systems? If we can force a manual reboot, we might be able to cut them off." Silva hesitated. "That would shut everything down, including our own life support." Kane grimaced. "Better to suffocate than be hunted one by one." "Understood." A sound clicked behind him. Kane spun, just in time to see the creature drop from the ceiling like a shadow turned solid. It lunged. Kane threw himself back as razor-sharp claws slashed through the air where his throat had been. His training took over. In one fluid motion, he rolled, raised his rifle, and fired point-blank into its chest. Direct hit. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched electronic wail as blue-black blood splattered across the walls. Sparks flickered where bullets had torn through exposed cybernetics beneath its flesh. It wasn't invincible, but it wasn't dead. It twisted, faster than anything Kane had ever seen, and lashed out. A searing pain exploded in Kane's side. He barely registered the impact before he was sent crashing into a wall, his vision blurring. His rifle clattered to the floor, and his entire body screamed in pain. The creature loomed over him. For the first time, Kane saw it clearly. It was tall, almost human in shape, but wrong. Its skin, if it could even be called that, was a mix of sleek, organic plating fused with advanced cybernetics. Its face had no mouth, just a set of 4 glowing, pulsing eyes that shifted colors as if scanning him. It tilted its head, studying him. Then, to Kane's horror, the thing spoke. Not in words, not in a voice. Through his own comm system. "You fight. You are not like the others." Kane's breathing was ragged. He gritted his teeth. "Yeah, well, I don't die easy either." The creature didn't respond. It simply raised a clawed hand, ready to finish him. Kane moved on instinct. His hand shot to his belt, grabbing a combat knife. In a single desperate motion, he drove it into the creature's neck. It screeched, jerking back as dark, viscous fluid gushed from the wound. Kane didn't wait. He grabbed his rifle, ignoring the fire in his ribs, and emptied the rest of his clip into its head. The creature convulsed, its cybernetic components flickering wildly, then collapsed. Dead. Kane exhaled sharply, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. He didn't have time to process the pain. He tapped his comm. "Silva, now, shut it all down." Silva's voice came back instantly. "Rebooting in 3, 2. Then, the ship went dark. Everything. Everything shut down at once. The hum of the engines, the lights, even the artificial gravity flickered out. For a brief, terrifying moment, Kane was weightless, floating in complete darkness. Then, a chorus of inhuman screeches erupted through the ship. They were blinded. Kane smirked, pushing off the wall and floating toward the emergency supply cabinet. He ripped it open, grabbing a set of magnetic boots and securing them to his feet. Then he armed himself with something heavier. A plasma launcher. "Silva," he said, locking the weapon in place. "Get everyone to the hangar. We're taking this fight to them." Silva's breath hitched. "Sarge, what are you planning?" Kane checked his weapon. His wounds could wait. Right now, there was only one thing that mattered. We take our damned ship back. Kane moved fast, his boots magnetized to the floor as the ship remained in complete darkness. Without power, the artificial gravity was gone, leaving everything floating in eerie silence. The emergency lights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the hallway. He could hear them, the creatures. Their distorted screeches echoed through the corridors, but they weren't moving as swiftly now. They had lost their biggest advantage, their ability to control the ship. Kane clenched his jaw. That meant the playing field was level. For now. But it wouldn't last. The creatures were smart, adaptive. They would find a way to override the reboot and regain control. Unless Kane and his team stopped them first. His comm crackled. "Sarge, we're at the hangar." It was Silva. Kane exhaled. "Status. We've got Hayes and 3 others. Some of the security turrets are still running on backup power, but everything else is offline. What's the plan?" Kane glanced toward the nearest junction. In the flickering red light, he saw another drifting object, one of the bodies from his squad. His hands tightened into fists. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about payback. "We're blowing this thing to hell." Silva hesitated. "Sarge, you mean the whole ship?" Kane took a slow breath. He hated this, hated that it had come to this. But there was no other way. "If we let them take the ship," he said, "they'll use it to get back to human space. And we both know what happens then." Silva was silent. She knew. They all knew. These creatures weren't just here to kill. They were here to learn. They had infiltrated undetected, adapted, studied human tactics. If even one of them escaped, it would mean extinction. There was only one option left. They had to destroy the ship. How? Hayes cut in, his voice tight. "The self-destruct system is tied to the ship's eye. With the core rebooted, we can't activate it." Kane's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we do it manually." A stunned silence followed. Then Silva spoke. "Sarge, are you saying we overload the reactor?" Kane nodded, even though they couldn't see him. "The reactor's fail-safes are down. If we breach the coolant lines and override the emergency containment, it'll build up energy until it detonates. That'll give us, what, 5 minutes?" Hayes asked. "Maybe less." A sharp breath. Then we need a way out." Kane glanced toward the hangar bay on his HUD map. The ship's drop shuttles were still intact. Their systems were separate from the main eye, which meant at least one of them should still be functional. "If we can get a shuttle running," Kane said, "we take it and get clear before detonation. And if none of them work..." Kane's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then we make sure those bastards go down with us." No one argued. There was nothing left to argue. Silva exhaled. "All right, let's get it done." Kane pushed forward, keeping his rifle raised. The emergency reboot had thrown the creatures into disarray, but they wouldn't stay disoriented for long. They had to move. He reached the main stairwell, gripping the railing as he pulled himself through the zero-G corridor. He had barely stepped into the reactor wing when his motion tracker flared to life. 3 contacts. Moving fast. Kane barely had time to react before something lunged from the shadows. He twisted, firing mid-turn. The plasma round hit its mark. A shriek of agony ripped through the corridor as the creature's cloaking flickered, revealing its nightmarish form. The cybernetic plating along its chest melted under the heat, exposing raw, pulsing tissue beneath. But it wasn't alone. Two more dropped from the ceiling. Kane threw himself back, barely avoiding a slashing strike as razor-sharp claws tore through his armor's shoulder plate. Sparks flew. He gritted his teeth and squeezed the trigger again, only for the rifle to click empty. Damn it. He pivoted, grabbing a grenade from his belt. Not an explosive. An EMP charge. Kane activated the timer and tossed it forward. A pulse of blue light ripped through the corridor. The creatures screeched, their cybernetics sparking violently as their cloaking flickered in and out. For a moment, they were exposed, staggering, vulnerable. Kane didn't hesitate. He grabbed his combat knife and drove it into the closest creature's skull. A sickening crunch. Then silence. The remaining two creatures were already retreating, their systems still struggling from the EMP blast. Kane didn't chase them. There was no time. He sprinted toward the reactor chamber, his magnetic boots clanking against the floor. The control panels were still offline, but that didn't matter. He wasn't here to shut it down. He was here to break it. Kane reached into his belt, pulling out a small detonator charge. He placed it against the coolant manifold and armed the trigger. The moment he pressed the button, the entire chamber shook. The pipes ruptured. Superheated steam burst into the air, and the reactor's core lights flickered dangerously red. Warning alarms blared to life. Chain reaction ionitidai. Heat. Containment failure in T-minus 240 CTONDS. Kane turned and ran. Silva. Haze. Reactors blowing. Get that shuttle ready. Static. Then Silva's voice came through. Frantic. We've got one working. Engines are powering up. Sarge. Movie. Kane barreled through the corridor. Behind him, the ship was tearing itself apart. Bulkheads ruptured. Fires ignited. The air boiled as the reactor's meltdown escalated. He could see the hangar doors ahead. He was almost there. A blur of motion. Kane barely had time to react as something slammed into him from the side. The force sent him crashing into the wall. His vision went white with pain. Then he felt it. A cold steel grip closing around his throat. The last remaining creature loomed over him. Its glowing eyes narrowed. You will not leave. Kane struggled, reaching for his sidearm. Too slow. The creature raised its other arm, a bladed appendage gleaming in the emergency lights. One strike. That's all it would take. Kane gritted his teeth. If he was going down, he was taking this thing with him. But before the creature could strike, a gunshot. The creature jerked violently. Then another shot, right through its skull. The alien collapsed, dead before it hit the ground. Kane looked up. Silva stood at the hangar entrance, rifle smoking. Sarge, move your ass. Kane didn't need to be told twice. He staggered to his feet, sprinting into the shuttle. Go. Silva didn't hesitate. The hatch sealed shut. The engines roared to life. As the shuttle blasted away, the ship behind them detonated. A blinding explosion tore through the void. The shockwave rattled the shuttle, sending it spinning, but they were clear. Kane slumped back in his seat, breathing hard. Silva exhaled. That was insane. Kane let out a tired chuckle. Yeah, but we won. Silva looked out the viewport, watching the burning remains of the ship disappear into the void. Did we? Kane didn't answer. Because in the back of his mind, one thought remained. What if one of them got away? The shuttle rattled as it entered the upper atmosphere. Kane braced himself against the control panel, feeling the violent tremors shake through the hull. Flames licked across the viewport as they punched through the atmosphere of the barren moon below. Silva fought with the controls, knuckles white, as she adjusted their descent vector. This thing wasn't built for a crash landing. Sarge, just hold it together, Kane barked, gripping the co-pilot's seat. Behind them, Hayes and the remaining survivors held on for dear life. The shuttle's alarm screamed, warning of critical system failures. The explosion had wiped out the enemy warship, but Kane wasn't celebrating yet. Not until they were safe. Not until he knew the fight was really over. A violent jolt threw them forward. Silva cursed. Landing thrusters are fried. We're going in hard. Kane gritted his teeth. Brace. The shuttle slammed into the rocky surface, metal screeching as it skidded across the ground. Sparks and debris filled the cockpit. The impact threw Kane against his harness, knocking the breath from his lungs. Then, silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then Silva coughed. Well, we lived. Kane exhaled. For now. He unstrapped himself and forced the emergency hatch open. Cold air rushed in as he stepped out onto the moon's surface. The sky above was a swirling black void, filled with the remnants of their destroyed warship. Pieces of burning debris fell like shooting stars. And then, movement. Kane's blood ran cold. Far across the jagged landscape, something shifted among the wreckage. A dark, metallic shape, barely visible against the rock. A survivor. One of them. Kane didn't hesitate. Weapons up. We're not done yet. Silva and Hayes grabbed their rifles, following Kane's gaze. The figure in the distance rose to its full height. A towering insectoid form. Its cybernetic plating gleamed under the dim light of the moon. Deep, mechanical eyes locked onto them. Then, it moved. Fast. Too fast. Contact. Kane shouted, opening fire. Silva and Hayes unleashed a volley of plasma rounds. The shot struck the alien's armor, but it barely flinched. It zigzagged through the terrain with unnatural speed, closing the gap in seconds. Then it vanished. Cloaking. Kane cursed. Keep your eyes open. It's hunting us. They backed toward the shuttle, moving slow. The air was deathly silent. The wind howled through the rocks. Then, a flicker. A shimmer in the air. Kane reacted instantly, pivoting and firing. The plasma bolt hit something midair, forcing the alien's cloaking to drop. It lunged. Kane barely had time to dodge before its bladed limb sliced through his shoulder armor. Sparks flew as he stumbled back, pain flaring through his arm. Silva and Hayes fired, but the alien was too fast. It spun, its cybernetic tail whipping through the air. Silva went down hard. Hayes turned to help, too slow. The alien struck again. Kane saw red as Hayes crumpled, motionless. Something inside him snapped. With a roar, Kane charged. The alien swiped again, but this time Kane was ready. He ducked under the blow and drove his combat knife straight into its side. The creature shrieked, metallic limbs spasming. Kane twisted the blade deeper. The alien retaliated, its arm clamping onto Kane's throat, lifting him off the ground. His vision blurred. The grip was crushing. His lungs burned. Silva. Where was Silva? He could barely see through the black spots creeping into his vision. Then, a gunshot. The alien jerked violently. Another shot, straight to the head. The creature stumbled. Its grip loosened. Just enough. Kane wrenched himself free, gasping for air. He didn't waste the opening. Grabbing his last grenade, he slammed it against the alien's chest. The magnetic lock clicked. The alien's mechanical eyes widened. Kane dove for cover. A second later, boom. The explosion ripped through the night. When the dust settled, the alien's body was a smoldering wreck. Kane groaned, pushing himself up. His armor was damaged. His body ached. But he was alive. Silva stumbled over, bruised but breathing. Is it dead? Kane stared at the remains. The alien's cybernetic core flickered, then finally went dark. He let out a slow breath. Yeah, it's dead. Silva sagged against a rock. Good, because I don't think I can fight another one. Cain didn't answer. Instead, he looked up toward the night sky. The battle was over. But deep in his gut, he knew this war was just beginning. Cain sat on a jagged rock, staring at the ruined battlefield. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burned metal and scorched earth. His body ached, his armor was barely holding together, and dried blood crusted over a dozen wounds. But he was alive. Limped toward him, dragging a makeshift sling around her injured arm. She dropped down beside him with a heavy sigh. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was eerie. No gunfire, no screeching alarms, no alien war cries, just silence. Cain let his head drop back, gazing at the sky. The wreckage of the enemy warship still burned in orbit, casting faint streaks of orange light across the horizon. The battle was over, but the scars it left behind would remain. Think anyone else made it? Silva finally asked. Cain exhaled slowly. Maybe. They had lost so many. Hayes, Bonner, the entire squad. Good soldiers, good people. And for what? Survival. A small victory in a war that had no end in sight. Silva rubbed her face, exhaustion settling into her bones. We should move. See if we can find any working comms. Cain nodded, but he didn't move right away. He was thinking about the war, about Earth, about what came next. The enemy had been stronger, faster, more advanced in every way, but they had won. Humans had won, not because of better weapons or superior tech. No, they had won because humans were stubborn, because they refused to break. And that was something no machine, no alien, no godlike intelligence could ever understand. Come on, Silva muttered, pushing herself up. Before we freeze to death out here. Cain forced himself to stand. His muscles protested, but he ignored the pain. He had no choice. There was always another fight ahead. The enemy would return. They always did. But so would humanity. And next time, they'd be ready.